And somehow, after a few months of talking, she said yes. And I did that for 4 years. We had 40% profit margins. Once she had personal financial freedom, I was like, I gotta show this to the world. And Operations House was born. She gave me her blessing, and I've been doing this for, oh my gosh, a year and a half, almost 2 years now.
Welcome to the MediaBooks Podcast, the only place on the internet where creative accounting isn't a bad thing. Owning a virtual firm today means having a professional and modern online presence, and in this podcast, we talk about how to do just that. My name is Kristen and I am the owner of MediaBooks, a media agency that provides creativity exclusively to accounting firms. And if you're an accounting firm owner, you're in the right place. Let's get into it. Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of the MediaBooks Podcast. Today I have with me Ashley Carroll. Ashley is the founder of Operations House and a fractional COO for accountants and creative service firms who are done running on fumes. After a decade as an accountant and COO, Ashley has helped firm leaders ditch overwhelm and build systems that support both profit and people. No tech wizardry required. She's known for turning operation chaos into breathing room, clear margins, and cultures where human first isn't just a buzzword, it's a bottom line. Ashley is passionate about helping bootstrap businesses build systems that truly work for their one-of-a-kind team and clients, without losing what she calls her clients' unique essence. Thanks so much for joining me, Ashley, and love that bio, but like in your own words, for people that don't know you, who are you? Who are you beyond the bio?
Yes. Hi. My name is Ashley Carroll. I am from the South Carolina, North Carolina area originally, but I live in Philly and have lived here since 2017. Power to the internet. I met my husband on Bumble here during a work trip when I was an accountant at a nonprofit. And we dated long distance for a year. And then I worked for remote companies since 2017, so pre-COVID, so very familiar with remote teams and infrastructures, but that allowed me to take a little crazy risk and do something I'd always wanted to do, which was move to a bigger city. And so Philly's been home for a long time. I love it. I'm here with my husband, big Phillies, Birds fans, and just try to go home every few months to see my family that I'm super close with still.
Nice. So you have a background in accounting.
Yes.
Tell me, so I also have a background in accounting. And there was unique points in that history where it was like, okay, I clearly shouldn't be in accounting. I don't know if you have that, I have that, but like, what was that transition like from accounting to operations?
This is so funny because I don't know if it's like this for everyone. Either you just know or you don't know. I'm one of those people who definitely knew I did not want to be an accountant. I wanted to be an entrepreneur. I grew up in a trailer park below the poverty line. I saw my mom make her way from Shoney's restaurant waitress, if anyone knows what a Shoney's is anymore. I'm dating myself. It's kind of like a Denny's. I don't know if anyone knows what Denny's is.
It's the East Coast thing. I was West Coast.
Yeah, like a Waffle House. And now she's a doctor of procurement ethics. You know, she really worked her ass off. And I actually had a really hard time figuring out why that made me want to be an entrepreneur, to connect the dots. Despite years of therapy. And it was actually an episode of Abbott Elementary that connected the dots for me. Do you watch that show?
I've seen like the first few episodes, but I fell off. I know I need to revisit it.
It's so adorable, but the whole point was there was someone working at the district and one of the teachers, and there's always kind of this teachers versus the district kind of thing.
Yeah.
And the teacher was like, this just doesn't seem like, you don't seem like the kind of person that would work at the district. Why do you do this? And he said, my mom was a teacher and I always just wanted to make things easier for her. And that really connected with me. I'm like, maybe that is kind of my internal monologue that, I went into college knowing I wanted to be an entrepreneur. I went to NC State and they have a first year college program where you can try out any majors, any classes that you want for your first year, which was so exciting. And I really just fell into entrepreneurship. I knew it was what I was going to do, and I just didn't know how it was going to take shape. And ultimately, I ended up having to transfer to Appalachian State for in-school tuition. So that's just a part of the system. And
Yeah.
someone told me, my marketing professor told me actually, to get a degree in something I didn't want to have to pay someone for once I was a
Mm,
business owner.
okay.
So
Interesting advice.
I started taking from a marketing professor as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I started taking accounting classes, and it was just one of those things that fit. You talk to people sometimes, they're like, you either get it or you don't, you like it or you don't. I got
Yeah.
it. T charts, great. I love the black and white. I love knowing everything balanced at the end. I love knowing there was a right and wrong answer. It fit. I was about one quarter semester away from graduating when I was like, oh shit, now I have to be an accountant. Like, what am
Yeah.
I going to do? And I went back to that marketing professor and he was like, I mean, what do you want to do? Like, you want to build a business? What do you want to do? And I kept saying, I want to help people. Now I can see I wanted to help people who were in my mom's position,
Hmm.
um, not have to sacrifice their well being to earn a paycheck.
Yeah.
And what that looked like was, having one job that earned a living wage that afforded you food, shelter,
Hmm.
childcare that you didn't have to worry about where your children were, like childcare that you wanted.
Yeah.
Um, and a little bit to do hobbies and things on the side and travel if that's your thing, to create that creative spark in you where you're not just your work, something outside for your identity. And he said, you need to go work for a nonprofit. It sounds like that's kind of like what you're going
Mm.
for,
Yeah.
and go see how that works. So off I went, with my 4 year degree to pay like $29,000 a year in 2016. So I was really bummed because all my friends were going big four, making
Yeah.
like twice what I was making. And I was like,
Yeah.
okay, it's going to be worth it in the end. So I'm going to learn. I'm going to be an entrepreneur. They're going to work for me one day. Um, and as the only staff accountant at a CDFI, so we were lending money to low income constituents to get them out of predatory loans, to pay for childcare, to pay for auto loans, to pay for school tuition, to community college, some things you couldn't get lending for at traditional banks,
Yeah.
especially with their kind of income or credit history. And so, very close to my heart because that was my family at one point receiving that care. And a board member asked me, hey, what is this line item uh, on the income statement? And I peeled all that back to realize it was actually late fees that we were charging to our loan holders, our neighbors that we were trying to help. And those late fees are reported to their credit. So these are supposed to be like credit rebuilder loans as well. They're multi-purpose. We have
Yeah.
grants coming from the SBA and USDA to support these funds, and it's just so antithetical to our mission. And I went over next door. My office was next to the bank that you had to walk into, just a tiny little two-teller bank. And I was talking to them, and I said, like, treat me like a customer, like what's going on? And as I walked through trying to make a payment, I said, okay, I can't get here by my car. What else do I do? There was nothing.
Hmm.
We lived in rural South Carolina. There's no bus system like there is in Philly. Like this isn't a time where um, Uber had like maybe just started, but there wasn't that many. So 85% of our loan holders, we were actually doing harm to their credit. They had cash in hand, but overall, the negative impact to their lives, unintentionally from not having a good system in place for them to make a payment back, a simple
Yeah.
process. really turned me from an accountant to an operator. From there, I was like, I have to fix this. So without
Yeah.
any grant money, had permission from the board, but that was about it.
Mhm.
Built out a payment processing system, an ACH system through the Federal Reserve Bank to our CDFI. Got approved through the SBA and USDA. I have to go through all these checks and balances because of the government money
Yeah.
to get a payment system. So when you logged on to the nonprofit website, you could hit make my payment. You could make it, and within 30 days, the 85% late went down to 7%. And that changed everything for me.
Yeah.
Like, there's more behind the numbers if you look at the story. Every accountant knows the numbers tell a story,
Mhm.
and that's what our numbers were telling. And it was a bad, bad story.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's where it was like, but if somebody just took the time to figure out why it was happening, rather than assuming our constituents are the type that don't pay, or a myriad of other things that you might
Yeah.
assume, if you really dig in and you get to the heart of it, it's most likely that there's just a process issue in place. And that has really firmed my belief that I've come to call of like, burnout is not a personal flaw, it's a business model flaw. Those
Yeah.
constituents weren't burned out for making their payments. There was no model for them to make their payments. There was no process in place. And if we would approach every problem that we have with that kind of curiosity and depth, then we could make a lot better changes. And now our goal is to help change the accounting world by putting processes like these in place. So from there, I went to work for remote accounting firms that were super tech forward because I knew, like, hey, I've got lots of ideas about how to build
Yeah.
processes to create better experiences. And in 2015, 2016, remote firms were coming online. So I went to work for Brandon Hall at Real Estate CPA, building out his accounting service line for his tax firm. And then I went to work for Nicole McKenzie, who was looking for a senior accountant for her accounting bookkeeping only CAS firm. And I have the email, it makes me laugh so hard. I said, I would love to do everything but that. Um, I would like to work
Oh, I
on
feel
your
the
client
same. Yeah.
process. You
Yeah.
know, like I want to work on protecting your team. I want to work on your sales. I want to work on all the things that connect, your ability to deliver those
Yeah.
great services out. And somehow, after a few months of talking, she said yes. And I did that for 4 years. We had 40% profit margins. Once she had personal financial freedom, I was like, I got to show this to the world. And Operations House was born. She gave me her blessing, and I've been doing this for, oh my gosh, a year and a half, almost 2 years now.
Yeah. There, everyone listening, strap in because this is probably going to be a long episode because I have so many like follow-up questions.
Yay!
Well, like there's so many layers to that, and that it's like the fact that you saw the problem, you're like, I can do this better. I feel like a lot of workers like see stuff and they're like, I can do this better. The entrepreneurship part is actually going and doing it. And then also the fact that you had the knowledge, experience to like see the problem and like no, like this is why this is happening. It's not just that our, our customers, clients don't pay. It's X, Y, and Z. And without your background, you wouldn't have been able to kind of step in and really help those people. And I mean, that's why I mean, doing operations for accounting firms, again, it's your background that really comes in and helps them kind of see the overall picture. That's a really awesome story. That's a
I
that's a
really
good story.
appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah, yeah. No, yeah, that's an incredible story. And I mean, I think yeah, I wouldn't say, I mean, that's the thing is when I had my sort of accounting career, there were little moments where like I had little opportunities to do marketing projects or like relationship type building projects. And like you start to see those little glimmers. And because so many different pieces of business overlap, I think if you pay attention, you can kind of find a good groove um, and still use your degree because, yeah, those things are expensive.
A hundred
Um,
percent.
yeah. And so I think sometimes, accountants, like we understand what falls under the category of accounting. We understand kind of well, most of the time we understand what falls under marketing. Operations feels like it's like everything's operations. What do you define as like what is operations? What falls under that department in a business?
Yeah, it's kind of Pandora's box depending on who you
Yeah.
ask. For small business, it's usually they would consider it everything outside of sales and delivery. That's
Mm-hmm.
client experience, those are your tech stack, your technology, your processes, your proposals, might fall under part of sales, but that's part of your legal and your financial and revenue as well. So people can kind of consider it everything. I say it's if you think of it like a house, it's the hallways that connect
Mm.
everything. It's how
Okay.
you get from room to room. How does a client get from sales prospect to lead to client to onboarded to offloaded? How does a team member come in and learn all those things or move through different roles? It's just the glue that holds everything together, and it's the synchronicity from beginning to end
Yeah.
that tells the story, that gives everybody their distinct role and motivation for showing up and being a part of that story. Because if you're just siloed and you think you're just tinkering away every day on the same thing, don't get me wrong, there are some people who just love to do the same thing every
Mm-hmm.
day. Like, and kudos to those people. We need you.
Yeah.
I call them rock stars, because they're like a very reliable boulder. They stay in one place, they do the same thing. You can count on them. And then you have superstars, the people who are always trying to like climb the ladder, do the next thing, find the next whatever. So there's a role for both, but having ways that you can care for both of those types of employees, have roles for both those, have workflows for both those. All of that is your operations. It's just the major, like, how. And those how get documented into your processes. And your processes, in my perspective, are your culture. How you
Mm-hmm.
do everything has everything to do with how it feels to be a team member or be a client of your business. So we come in, and our goal is to really focus on the why and the how of what you do to make sure that it is both psychologically safe and profitable.
Okay. So I think like your example of the hallways, I think is a great example because I think when accountants first start their firm, they create like these buckets. They're like, this is where I'm going to do my accounting work, and this is where I'm going to do my marketing, and this is where my contracts are, and they have all these separate like folders in Google Drive. And as they grow, things start to overlap, and you're like, wait, that document needs to be in both those folders. Do I duplicate it? Do I give access? I experienced this the other day. Like we had a process for like putting on our team calendar like when you're out of the office. And we just brought in a new person and like for
Heyo.
some reason it blew up the whole system. And I'm like, why is this no longer working? And it was just simplest process of like just tell me when you're on vacation.
Mm-hmm.
And like everything kind of fell apart. And so but then you're doing this at the point when you're like so busy and overwhelmed. So for founders who feel like too busy and overwhelmed to work on their business when all this stuff is kind of coming apart, how do you approach making operational changes feel doable?
Oh, so we've had to really learn this the hard way because I was a full-time COO before this for 4 years, and there was a big difference between being, fully available to one business versus trying to collaborate with a business owner effectively and efficiently, without, losing track of where we were week to week. And a lot of what I was finding when I was first kicking off with people is, the first 3 months were them just treading water, trying to get above water. So we completely flipped the way that we approach services, and we only start with what we call founder resets, because that's what I kept calling it to my team when I was like, I'm overwhelmed. Like, I just need a day to reset. I just need a day to reset. And I said that so many times, it just turned into our service name of like, what is the number one headache in your business right now. It could be your email inbox. It could be you don't have any control over your calendar. So people just book onto it. And by the time that you get to your calendar, you're like, oh, great. None of it's left for me. That's
Yeah.
cool. It could be that you're still manually typing every proposal. You could be reviewing every email that goes out to clients. Whatever that thing is that you shouldn't be doing anymore, that's where we're going to start. Because by fixing that one thing, that's going to open up 5 to 10 hours a week on average for you to actually start to consider anything that's in that operational bucket more deeply on the level that I want you to think about it, which is I'm not a band-aid fix solution. And there are a lot of coaches and other programs out there that will offer quick fix solutions, but we're going to come in and get to that root of the why. I'm going to have
Yeah.
that conversation with you and your team. I don't normally talk to clients unless people ask me to, but I'm more than happy to if they want an unbiased perspective and interview. But we're going to get to the real root of the problem and fix that. And we can typically do that first major thing because it's usually something so superficial, like you said, that like it just one thing came in and it blew up all of a sudden,
Yeah.
and you just don't have the time to fix it. And band-aid fixing it isn't really saving you any time. So if I can come in and really get that one thing under control, now you have one whole day a week to
Mhm.
actually think about operations. Well, now that's a horse of a different color. Now we can start to actually set goals, like revenue goals or team goals or delegation goals or financial goals because of my accounting background. So the way that we make it doable is just by not overwhelming you and saying, let's take it one step at a time, one big major headache at a time. And when they get that, like instant gratification after the 3 weeks, it just gives them a lot of confidence. Usually they'll take a couple weeks off and then we'll start the recurring engagement because they just need a breather and we totally
Yeah.
get it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think it's that I think it's the burnout of just like yeah, feeling like I put all this stuff in place and then now it's not working and I don't have time to put it together. Um, and for every single founder, it's going to be different. And so I guess, accountants, they have a fairly, and even marketing, I guess we both have like a fairly processed list of services. And so I imagine with your services, things are a little bit more tailored and like change from one client to the next, like a lot of consulting. How does that work?
Yeah, I tell this to anyone because I'm just not ashamed or embarrassed to tell my experience. I try to live it on LinkedIn as much as possible for people who are just like building and bootstrapping the same as me. It took me 8 months to land my first client. My pitch was such shit. I was just like, I can do anything for you, because
Yeah.
as an operations person, that's how you feel.
Yeah.
And I got burned bad my first year of service by saying, I can do anything. And, but there was only one way to figure out what my services were going to be, and it was going to be through testing. And so
Yeah.
I needed to do it. I needed to say yes to whatever people were kind of asking for. And that led to me, writing 50-page team manuals from, A to Z of everything that they do, which is great because now I
Yeah.
have handbook writing experience and templates that I can share with tons of other teams and
Yeah.
processes for that. But yeah, the first year I ended up just eating it really in terms of hours, margin, everything that I talked the talk about. I found after year one I wasn't walking the walk about necessary evil, but it really like forced me in a way that other people aren't forced as often if this isn't the work that they
Yeah.
do to reflect and say, okay, you're not making a profit. Let's start there. You're not feeding your family.
Yeah.
I left my six-figure W-2 job. Like, let's think about, just
Yeah.
the logistical stuff. let's productize some things. And that led to, kind of a three-tiered service, which we still carry today for our ongoing service members. And that essentially is how often are we working together and how often am I working with your team. So the more I meet with you, the more I meet with your team, the bigger the packages are. But it doesn't change what we're working on because to your point, it's so different for everyone. So I
Yeah.
have a structure I call the 12-week year. It's actually a book. And I put the template online for free if anyone wants to use it. And that's how I break down major projects, rocks, milestones, goals that
Yeah.
people want. That's the workflow that we use. And then I hold them accountable and their team accountable to it every single week and help them when they run into the roadblock. So you would have called me and said, okay, my calendar thing got blown up. Can you fix it? And I would have just gone in the back end and fixed it for you. But there's a process that's ongoing and there's a process when you're building, right? And you're building something new and you're integrating, you're elevating something new. And so, we might be in one phase or the other with an ongoing client. And I really encourage people to only do like two phases of that elevation a year, and let the other two be maintenance and feedback because that's another big thing as we're growing as small businesses. You know, like me, I click every morning. What are my analytics? What are this? Who's coming to see me? Am I growing? Am I doing it right? And we don't leave enough room, don't have enough patience for the feedback. And so letting the processes simmer, letting the kinks come up, that's a big part of our process too, on
Mm.
making room for those conversations,
Yeah.
getting the ideas and feedback. It's just stuff that people are not going to have time for if it's not their job, if you're in the
Yeah.
middle of sales or delivery.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting when you mentioned like as the issues come up. I don't know if you watch like Bar Rescue. They have
Yeah.
they start with like a stress test and you stress test your whole team and figure out okay, like where are the issues coming up. And
Yes.
it's a great way if you feel like, hey, everything's running smoothly, do a stress test and see like all the potential issues and communications issues come up, and then you'll have plenty to work on. Well, plenty for your operations person to work on.
A hundred
Um,
percent. Have
but
someone
yeah,
sit in front of you and say, like, I mean, that's my approach. If you want to work on your onboarding, I will say, I am your client, onboard me.
yeah,
If you want to work on your team member, I'm going to say, I'm that team member. I'm sitting in front of you. What do you want to say?
yeah, yeah,
Like we're just going to put it in the position to see, like you said, what really, like, let's base this in reality. That's why I like kind of mockingly call myself chief reality officer because like it's nice to have frameworks and everyone's LinkedIn post of do it this way, do it that way. It looks great on Instagram carousel.
yeah,
Like, yeah, it all seems so simple, but the actual execution of doing it, keep it simple, stupid. It's
yeah,
in the consistency. You can do consistent stuff if you understand how to do it and you're not like annoyed by doing it. Build the simple stuff, the routine stuff in.
yeah, yeah. And so tell me about like when you first start working with a client. I imagine there's a lot of upfront work, like things that are required from them. Do you ever struggle getting the team on board when there's like, hey, like we got to get this all figured out, guys, and they're like, it's the beginning of the month. I'm too busy to be doing da 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 da. How do you handle like I guess the more communication management of like trying to get everyone on like board for like a new system or a new process that you're trying to do when they have their own processes that work.
Yeah, yeah. I would say for any operations person, my biggest piece of advice on getting buy-in is not recommending anything before you learn how it's already done. I
Yeah.
mean, outside of that just being like the way that I learned and naturally and came across it, I also was a client-facing accountant who had a salesperson who wasn't an accountant. And I would get very frustrated because I would just have new clients one day and they've been sold X, Y, and Z. And I'm now just the delivery person. And some of that stuff doesn't even fucking exist because you're not an accountant, So you're selling
Yeah.
them like a backwards 12-month forecast and you're like, a what? And I was so frustrated. And I talked to a team member one day And he said, Ashley, um, it's like a waiter. They don't have to be a chef, but they need to understand what's going on inside the kitchen to be good.
Okay.
And that really connected with me, where
Yeah.
I was like, this comes back to the synchronicity of the salesperson needs to truly understand, and this is where I'll stand behind only having salespeople in place who have done that job before for the
Mm.
services that they're selling. I think that's a
Yeah.
big thing. Um, and maybe there are other people who have other approaches, but at least for very small businesses with client facing teams where culture is very important, um, that's just a huge recommendation of mine. And so when I come in, I have to start obviously with the owner's buy-in. Typically, they're accountants. The financial ROI is there. It's proven. I can show you a million case studies. It's the emotional ROI of I'm going to have conversations that I haven't had before. I'm going to have to make myself more available to my team than I've had to be before. Or maybe I feel like I'm so available to my team already, I can't imagine being more available to them. The team is like, I've heard you talk about EOS before. I'm burned. You think that you're going to make things better. You don't know me. You don't know the
Mm.
company. I have to come in and spend the time getting to know them. That's why the tiers are built on the first tier is solopreneur, and that's just me and you. But the second tier is at least a monthly meeting with your entire team because
Yeah.
I'm going to introduce myself and I'm going to talk with them and we're going to spend time together and I'm going to become someone that they can rightfully trust. And you and I are going to have an understanding that not everything that they share with me you're going to be privy to because that's not my job. My job is to create a psychologically safe and profitable workplace for you. And that doesn't just come by you having control over everything, which I think is a difference.
Yeah.
Because as a solopreneur previously, I definitely want control over everything. And the idea of you talking to my team, for me, it's no big deal because that's how I raise my team. But for a lot of people, that can be scary. But
Yeah.
once you let me in and you start to see, takes a couple of meetings. Once I make one impactful change that they can tell I really listen to them, even if it's just something little, like their boss stopping saying something to them, like we had a tax team who my introduction to them was in January. I got to have one meeting with them a month. And boy, did they not want to spend 45 minutes a month during tax season meeting with
Yeah.
me. But every month I came in there and I just said, just tell me what's going on. Tell me what's going on. Tell me a story about what's going on with your clients. Like what's on your mind right now. Nothing else. There's no homework on your end. I'm just trying to learn. Let's just learn. You can
Yeah.
bitch, you can celebrate, whatever you want. And something came up that they kept saying that one of the partners kept saying, there's no rush. We can do extensions. And they kept feeling like, yeah, that's super disrespectful to my 60-hour weeks that I'm working right now. If there's
Mm.
no rush, why am I working 60 hours a week? And that's
Mm.
that communication piece.
Yeah.
Like, oh
Yeah.
man, if I could like rename operations on the Pandora's box, we just call it communications.
Yeah.
Um, so I could go back to the partner and say, hey, what do you mean when you say to your team that there's no rush for extensions? Tell me like exactly what you mean by that. Process wise, emotion wise, like what's the impact that you want that to have on them? And then explaining to him his team's perspective. Well, now he doesn't say that anymore. Now
Mm.
the team feels like, okay, I have a facilitator who's not
Yeah.
going to throw me under the bus, who truly cares about me because they were once in my position, because I
Yeah.
was, who wants to make things better because I know that I can. I've proved it at other firms. And I want to change the industry of accounting so that we don't have this mental health crisis that we have going on that's already so prevalent in the world. Work should be a place that's safe.
Yeah.
You spend so much time there. That's really our goal. So it's a slow process. It takes 1 to 3 months when you have a
Yeah.
team, but it is so worth it. And that's why we tend to work with clients long term, ongoing, just a handful at a time. I don't ever imagine having more than 10 clients at a time between me and my chief of staff, who's an organizational psychologist, because we kind of bounce everything off of each other and we dig in really deep to make sure that every recommendation we make is not just because it's a fad, it's a new tool, it's the fancy new thing. It could be as simple as just tearing something way back down to something simple and having a communal checklist or a daily stand-up that never existed before. These things don't have to cost money outside of my fees, you know.
Yeah.
But yeah, it takes time, and rightfully so. Yeah, I wouldn't want anybody to just take my recommendations at face value. And I don't think, like I said the same thing as an accountant when people were searching for accounting services. If you go to an accountant who says that they can just fix everything for you for $300 a month, run the other direction,
Yeah.
without getting to know you. Like, same for marketing. If I can turn your website into something that completely represents you in 10 days, bullshit. You have to take the time to get to know me,
Mhm.
and
Yeah.
whatever that looks like. So.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, it's interesting because you talk about like the sales, like being able to do sales well as an accountant, you need to know the marketing, or you need to know the the actual operations, the work being done.
Yeah, the
Um,
value.
yeah, and I mean that's our whole shtick is that we're accountants that do marketing, and I mean we it's actually funny you say like there's no way you can do it in 10 days. So our web design process is 2 weeks, but
Oh,
here's the
well,
thing.
screw me.
Well, no, no, no. But here's the thing. Here's the caveat to that is that we figured out in our process, like, we ask the same questions over and over. We're going to ask you. So we do the work in 2 weeks, but there's usually like 2 to 3 hours of homework that we assign to you where, like, we get to
Mm,
know you. And
okay,
so
so
it's all
that's
these
still
questions.
there.
Yeah. And so it's like still like trying to get to know you. We do deep research. And so, like, I think it's just like, yeah, you can't do the thing unless you do get to know them.
You put the
Um,
time in,
yeah,
even if it is in 2 weeks, like you're saying, if you're doing the deep research, if you're putting the time in, I mean,
yeah, yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, and we're very nosy with our questions.
And it sounds like
So
you have a recipe, so that's the good stuff, when you've
yeah,
done it so many times that you know how to get to something more
right,
quickly, right?
right.
That's the secret sauce, the secret essence.
Yeah, yeah. And I think that's like when you're working with accountants and I mean like you said, like you're trying to get to know them, trying to understand their job. They have all these busy, things going on. I think a lot of times people just want a place to vent to about their problems and like not only can you be that person, you can also like solve those problems potentially. Um and so my gosh, how is that not seen as something valuable to have in a
Yeah.
firm?
A lot of
Um
people like always ask about training their customer relationship managers as accountants because
mhm.
it's just a big thing that's going on. And I always say, anytime you hear a complaint from a team member, a customer, your boss, take that as an opportunity to fix something. I
Yeah.
know it's really hard, like people aren't wired to hear complaints that way, but that's the sales mindset of I'm hearing your pain point. How do I solve that pain point?
Yeah. Yeah. Totally. I have one last question I want to ask you. I think a
Sure.
lot of times when people think about operations and making things more efficient, they think about, well, now they think about AI and technology and zaps. And we just had this whole conversation about communication, but I guess if you could answer this simply, uh, making things more efficient, is it just about creating like zaps between your email and your calendar, or is there like a more like technical, can you actually help me?
Yeah, I mean, the zaps are the stepping stones for you to have time for the communication stuff, so that's how that works together. I'm a big fan of the zaps. I'm a big fan of reducing clicks, as I say.
Hmm.
Nobody just wants to click buttons all day. So if you can reduce as many clicks as possible, that's what gives you the physical and mental bandwidth and energy to then engage in the true operational meaty stuff of the communication and the how and the why of everything. So there's a place for both of it.
Yeah.
We have a team on the back end that builds out the zaps and the clicks and the implementation part of it. So you need both. Without execution, strategy is just a barrel of good ideas. So, we need them all. But don't shy away from AI, I think, is my biggest piece of advice. Let it help you to make that 80% repeatable stuff in your business easier so that you can spend time on the 20% that makes you stand out from the crowd.
Yeah. Awesome. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Ashley. Is there any sort of like final words of encouragement or things you'd like to promote, say, sort of your wild card time?
Oh my gosh. I guess if I had any words of encouragement, it would be to be really patient with yourself. That's something that I've had to practice a lot. And to ask for help. Find people that do what you don't do well, really well, and try to learn as much as you can from them. Don't be shy. Everybody needs a community. I think that's where we met originally.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, find your community, ask for help. And that's just my biggest piece of advice for anyone growing. If you're stuck, shame is like embarrassment is the biggest thing that's going to keep you with a shitty website or a sad team. So, yeah, reach out and ask for help.
Yeah, most definitely. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Ashley. We are going to have a few things in the show notes that you guys need to be sure to check out. We have a free, from Ashley from Operations House, we have the free Burnout Recovery Kit and then also 3-week Founder Reset. Be sure to check out those links in the show notes. Be sure to follow her on LinkedIn. She is hilarious. Thank you so much, Ashley, for joining me.
Thank you. Bye now.
Bye. When it comes to designing websites, the service page always takes much more time than anticipated. It can sometimes be hard to verbalize everything you do, so I always recommend simplifying, which is what I'm going to do right now with MediaBooks. Here at MediaBooks, we offer 3 services for every stage of your business. We offer web design for when you are just getting your marketing strategy up and running, or you need a website refresh. We offer website audit services for those DIYers, and we also have advisory services for those who love their website and are ready to advance their marketing skills. Get started with MediaBooks by visiting MediaBooksAgency.com. MediaBooks, the only place on the internet where creative accounting isn't a bad thing.